Okay. So I think it's recording. Yeah, I don't know.
Hi, sweetheart.
Hello.
I think that's my new sign up.
I miss whatever y'all was talking about.
Martin, are you going to join me or you or not?
No, I think I'm okay because yours is a presentation.
Okay.
Is that cool?
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. I just wasn't sure.
I can introduce you with me.
Yes, I would. Appreciate that.
And you want your full name too?
Yes.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi. Thank you for being with us all weekend, and thank you for staying for the last program of ACES 2022. I want to introduce to you Jasmine Iona Brown. She is presenting Sculpting Billy Ray, Part 2. We were graced with Part 1, I think 2 years ago, the last time we got together in person. So give it up for Jasmine Iona Brown.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Yes, I did the first part of this presentation 2 years ago, and I was talking about a sculpting project that I started in 2018 as a memorial sculpture of Billy Ray Shirley III for Tacoma's Metro Parks. It was an interesting application procedure. You can flip to the next slide, please. And first it started with a call to artists for a community center that was being built in my neighborhood on the east side of Tacoma. And I saw this call to artists come up. And I'm a graduate of the public art training boot camp that was sponsored by the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture. So I was excited to apply, but it's like, you know what, I've never done a full-size bronze sculpture before. I'm thinking my shot of getting this commission is small, but I'm going to apply anyway because I live just a few blocks away from where the new community center is going to be built. And I knew the sculpture was going to be of a young man who tragically was murdered that was from our neighborhood. So I submitted my application. These are some of my resume highlights that I included in my presentation to the artist panel. Next slide, please. Some of my previous work had included memorial icons. So this icon that you're seeing now is a piece I did in 2012 after Trayvon Martin's tragic murder. And this piece is currently in the collection of the Trayvon Martin Foundation in Florida. So it's with his parents now. I never had any intention of selling it. I wanted to make sure that it was donated either to the family's foundation or to a museum to memorialize Trayvon. Next slide, please. This was some of my first public art pieces. Black teen wearing hoodie, playing a guitar. My son was the model for this piece. And this was a temporary art commission that was on display on Delridge Avenue in West Seattle. So I had several of these pieces on bridge pillars and outside a music shop. And some of them were vandalized in pretty bizarre ways. But I wanted to make the point that black teens or just teens who do regular things like strum a guitar. I think this is the last time my son ever held that guitar when I took that picture, but we still have it at home. I bought it for him. He played saxophone in school up until his sophomore year, where he was like, I don't want to do this anymore, Mom. I'm done. And there was also a piece of him that was a part. I was invited to show in other exhibits, like by Photo Center Northwest, and that piece was a picture of my son reading Pedagogy of the Oppressed. Anyone who's ever read that book knows it's kind of a graduate level book. So I had a great picture of him stumbling over the vocabulary as he's like flipping through the book, and so that was a full-size decal of him. That was also vandalized multiple times on Capitol Hill, outside of Photo Center Northwest, and several other businesses in the Capitol Hill district offered to sponsor that piece, including the Fry Museum. So there were, after the first vandalism of that piece in Capitol Hill, there was multiple J's sprouted up around the neighborhood, some of which were also subsequently vandalized as well. And it made me think about, as a black mother, I'm always concerned about my son, and I wondered if he was in that, physically there in that space when the vandals came by, if they would have treated him with as little regard as they treated a photo of him sticking on a wall. But I was like, maybe I would really love to do this sculpture to a young man who was murdered. So, next slide, please. That's a reference photo of my son, and so I tried my hand with some very messy air-dry clay to do a quick bust to show the committee. This was actually the image that I showed them to prove that yes, I can sculpt, I can do work in 3 dimensions, even though now I look at it at that bust and cringe. Next slide, please. And this was the building under construction, the Eastside Community Center. It's a huge, beautiful new center. It was going to have a swimming pool and basketball courts and all of that in it, and multiple artist opportunities in the building. So I was really excited about participating in that. Next slide, please. I also talked about my proposed fabrication methods, including more examples of work that I've done, and to convince the committee that they should choose me. Next. So fabrication, I talked about bronze casting. I already had some contacts in Tacoma that I knew I could count on to potentially do the casting and the fabrication of the piece. Next slide, please. And I talked a little bit about the fabrication methods, and they chose me. So I beat out some other sculptors, one guy from Portland in particular, and the committee was made up of Billy Ray's mom was on that committee, selection committee, and she's like, I wanted someone who understood my story to do the work. I tragically lost 2 of my foster sons back in 2008 to gun violence. So I could understand a bit of her pain, and that tragic loss motivated her with Billy Ray's friends to campaign and lobby the state and city government to raise enough money to make this community center a reality. So I think they raised $4 million or something to build this community center. And so I was honored to be selected for this piece. Next slide, please. So there were several options. There were lots of ideas. Once I got the commission, there was lots of ideas floating around. I was like, what do we want this sculpture to look like? I said, well, okay, for this budget, I can do 1 full-size figure with a small plaque. Next slide. And I gave examples of what a full-size figure would look like the Jimi Hendrix sculpture, or the very tall Sojourner Truth, where people could stand next to it and pose next to it. Next. Option 2 is a bus with multiple small plaques of some members of Team Billy Ray who helped raise money for the community center and the process. I talked about the cost involved with a large hunk of marble that would go underneath the bust. And I gave some examples. Next slide, please. So this Sojourner Truth, that's I believe this is in the Capitol Rotunda building. I could be wrong about that, but you see Michelle Obama there. And you see the scale compared to the women sitting next to it. I also talked about the next slide, please. The possibility of commemorating the members of Team Billy Ray in a plaque form. And we went back and forth about that, and also talked about, it's like, well, if you want Billy Ray to be shown as a posthumous part of Team Billy Ray, next slide please, we could do a bas-relief panel, and that would include everyone, because there's 16 members of Team Billy Ray, in addition to his mother and his brother. Next slide, please. And that's an example of what a bas-relief plaque would look like, and we'd have to support that facade maybe outside or somewhere inside the building, and so I talked about that process. And next slide, please. And I talked about bas-relief. I did a small bas-relief bust to kind of exemplify what that might look like. And I also talked to reel the committee back in, because my committee was not made up of all of artists who understood what you could do with $70,000. So it seems like a lot of money. But then when you start fabricating that, the cost of the metal, the cost of the installation, paying taxes and all of that, it adds up quickly. Next slide, please. I talked about what's above and beyond. We can't do a gigantic sculpture for that money. You see the average sized woman standing next to this enormous Sojourner Truth statue. We can't do multiple full-size figures. Next slide. And we also cannot, multiple full-size figures, and how much space that would take up in a room. This is actually in a building that is in a gift shop of a museum. This would be more like a $700,000 commission, not a $70,000 commission. And that takes up a lot of space, and they didn't have that much space in the lobby to spare. So, next slide, please. One of the challenges also of the committee decided, let's just do the singular figure sculpture. One of the challenges of doing this piece was I was working for photographs. Not all of them were very close up or showed multiple sides of the young man at the same age, in the same outfit. And so that was a challenge. His mother kindly sent me his baby pictures, every photo she had of him, different expressions, different ages, and it's like, oh boy, this is going to be a challenge sculpting from a photo. And also trying to get the exact pose. Again, this is my son who I've drafted into, next slide. That's my son. I've drafted into being my model. And I was working from various photos. And I had questions for the committee and for his family. How tall was Billy Ray? How much did he weigh? What kind of hairstyle do you want? Did he have any facial hair? Clothes, make and style, shoe size, shoe brand. I'm glad I was as thorough as I was, because that was ended up being very, very important to his family and his friends. So I collected information on that. Next slide, please. Tried to work out exactly what the pose would be. And I said, when I showed this to the committee, I said, excuse the pompadour. They did not have an afro in this 3D modeling program. But that his hair would be like a tapered fro. Next slide, please. Okay, budget. I had to do a budget breakdown of what my artist fee would be, the materials and fabrication, the installation consultations, and install. I had to hire a structural engineer to figure out what kind of bolts we needed to use to make the sculpture sturdy. Of course, pay taxes and a contingency in case something went wrong, and I had to fix it. And so ultimately there were a number of delays, including a delay for COVID, and also a delay because the Parks Department changed their mind about where they wanted the sculpture installed. Initially they wanted to be on the outside of the building. We selected a spot, and their risk mitigation person's like, not there. Somebody's gonna climb on that, bust their head, and the parks are gonna be liable for it. Put it inside instead. And then after we went through several locations on the inside, the atrium was selected. And I had to get 2 workups by a structural engineer when the location changed. So that ate up part of my contingency budget as well. Also, this project was supposed to initially be less than a year, and it took 4 years ultimately from signing the contract to installation. Next slide, please. So, my steps, working from a photograph, were to sculpt Billy Ray, and I went through 3 iterations of the clay bust before his mom and friends were happy. But it was really important to me to make sure that when they looked at the bust, they saw him. So I started over 3 times and did lots of adjustments. So here you see the finished clay bust with Billy Ray's picture behind it, and plaster casts of hands. Those were my son had very large hands, ball player, and so I cast again, dragged him into being a reference for me. Did plaster casts of his hands to be Billy Ray's hands. Next slide, please. Then the fabricator I chose was Two Raven Studio in Tacoma to do the plaster casts and the bronze pour and all of that. So they did a rubber mold. So this is the rubber that they're starting to pour over my bust, and the rubber mold that they made from that. Next slide. And they casted a wonderful head that once we put on the body was too big. Yeah. I was like, no. Because I was looking at a 4th resculpt of the head. And my wonderful fabricator suggested, it's like, well, let's try this shrinking resin that I've used once before on smaller pieces. Let's see if it works before you start resculpting this, and it takes months for you to do it. Let's try this. So the blue version is the resin. So they did another cast using the rubber mold they kept, and used this resin that shrank. So, and it's like, okay, and it shrank a little bit unevenly. So it's like, I don't like how it really shrunk his nose, and his ears look really small now, and it took down his chin. His features aren't as full anymore, and so I was a little uncomfortable with that. But when his mom saw it, and on the one side where you see the 2 busts, one was the lower one without the neck, is the one that I initially sculpted the wax straight from that, and the one that's mounted on the shoulders is the blue one that's slightly shrunk just a little bit, and it's like imperceptible in the photos, but in real life you could see the differences in the features. And I was kind of upset, like, oh boy, I want to resculpt this again. I called in his mother, and his mother said, oh, it's fine. It still looks like him. I still look at him and recognize him. It's cool. It took down his afro some. Okay. And it's like, okay, I was glad that she was so chill about it. Next slide, please. So in the wax stage, we also had a chance to build in some Easter eggs for people who knew him. So these are like some little dice that we casted and put in the fold of his hoodie because he used to like to play dice. He also has 2 necklaces around his neck that we just cast the necklaces. And this has 2 rings on the end. So that was something he always wore. So for people who knew him, they would recognize that. So those were really nice things. We were able to get lots of detail in the wax cast. Next slide. So then there's casting the metal of the different body parts that they're going to assemble. So you see one of the hands here, they haven't cleaned it up. This is before they chase off the extra stuff that's left over from the floor. So I was holding that. The glasses are there for the size and scale. And then his feet, the Air Force Ones, the family was very adamant about his shoes being tied right. And they came in, his mom found a vintage pair of Air Force Ones that were exactly the style that he wore. And his friends came out and tied them exactly the way he tied them, the specific way he tied them. And I used a fabric setting resin to freeze the laces in place so that they could be cast. Because I didn't want to get that wrong. And that was a small detail that it was really nice having the family and his friends there to work with me along the process. Next, please. Then there was welding and sandblasting. So you see the head on the sandblasting table, they had to sandblast all of the pieces before they're welded into the larger body. You see the piece coming together. After sandblasting, you see the weld marks. We weld on the arms, the hands, and such. Next. So coming together. So you see that it's taking shape. He's kind of got this terracotta color right now. That's the sandblasted metal. And then once they weld it all together, they smooth it out, and it's ready. You can't even see the seams anymore by the time he is that gray figure fully assembled. Now he's ready for a patina. Next slide, please. So they bring in their patina guy who works on him all day, applying different chemicals to the metal and heat to create the different shades and gradation for the sculpture. So we decided we wanted his hair to be darker, his jacket's black, his jeans are regular denim color, dark jeans, but he's wearing a t-shirt that would have been white, and then the gold on the chains and so on. So we're trying to decide, okay, what color shade should his skin be, and there was discussion about that. And so next slide, please. And so there you see a close-up of the patina. And this is before the last couple of coats, kind of a brown coat that is like the last stage. But you see the gradation and the shadows and depth that's created by just adding the patina to the piece. Next slide, please. Then delivery and installation day. So delivery, they took like 5 men to lift the sculpture off the back of the pickup truck. And you see the installation crew there drilling holes in the atrium floor so that they could install the piece. Next slide. And also according to the structural engineer decided would be safe and sturdy, hammering in the bolts into the concrete beneath the atrium. The gentleman there in the plaid shirt, once they finished the install, he tested it by hanging off the arm and swinging. So just to make sure, okay, yeah, it's in there. It's sturdy. Because the park specifically designated that they wanted to make sure this piece would be secured securely enough that two grown men could climb on it at the same time and not knock it over. So that's what it's engineered to withstand. I think that would have been more relevant had the piece been outside. This is in the atrium, actually inside the community center, where in the front, where the community center staff could watch the shenanigans that might happen. But you know, safe is better. So next slide, please. After the installation, we hung up black curtains and stuff to hide the sculpture until it was officially unveiled. Governor Inslee swung by for a visit to see the sculpture. Shalisa Hayes, Billy Ray's mom, had directly petitioned Inslee for money for the community center. So they had met in person. She ambushed him in an elevator somewhere in the Capitol building and, you know, talked him out of a large chunk of money for the community center. It's like, wow, I love your drive and motivation, ambushing governors in elevators to raise money for this. But Inslee swung by and paid a visit. So that was really wonderful. I had a chance to meet him, and he had a chance to see the sculpture. Next slide, please. Shalisa Hayes and her youngest son, Jamez, next to her. She's speaking at the unveiling, and the community came out for the unveiling October 23rd of last year. Next slide. Public reaction. There's been lots of great feedback. You see Jamez there taking a picture with the sculpture. Little kids come in and hug it. I've noticed in the months that it's been up that the hands show a little bit of the patina wearing off because those people touch his hands, and which is fine. A patina could be put back on. Wax coating can be reinstalled. But I love the fact that the community is really interacting with the piece, and people come in and pose with it all the time. Kids walk up and hug it and touch it as well. And I got to meet more members of Billy Ray's family, and they said a lot of them were in tears, very moved by the piece, and thanked me for all of my hard work. Next slide, please. I also want to acknowledge Two Ravens Foundry, that when I ran into difficulties, like the head being a little bit too big for the body, they came up with solutions. They were patient with me, since this was the first time I had taken on doing a bronze of this size. And we went through lots of iterations and delays, even through the pandemic. It's like, please don't close. So, you know, I need you guys to hang in there with me, and they did indeed. So the folks from Two Ravens are on the slide closest to me on the left-hand side. It's Ed and Katrina and one of their other staffers. They're standing behind Billy Ray. And in the other shot is the structural engineer, Christopher Shaw, with the hat on, and my husband with his signature salt and pepper fro standing there as well. It was thanks to the support of not only my subcontractors, but my family and friends, that I was able to land this commission and complete it and have everyone be happy. Last slide, please. And there's me next to the piece. Any questions? Yes.
So I noticed like your sculpture has a lot of like flow to it, like the fabric and stuff.
Yes.
Like is that something that took you a lot to achieve, or is that a pretty rudimentary technique?
Well, you know, I started off trying to sculpt the whole body, and a instructor that I had at Pratt told me, get a mannequin and dress it and coat it with resins to harden the fabric so you can cast the mold off of it. She said, that's going to take you forever. Because I started off thinking, it's like, oh, I'll just sculpt it in stone. You know, I was a little ambitious when I first got the commission, and she's like, because she had done memorial bronzes before, and she's like, no, child, no, just no, reel it back. And I'm glad that she decided that she suggested that to me, because that allowed the opportunity for like Billy Ray's mom to bring me the shoes. And have them tied just the right way, and we narrowed down the exact kind of pair of. She brought me a pair of Billy Ray's jeans to put on the mannequin so they could cast the jeans he actually wore. So if I hadn't gone with dressing a mannequin, I would not have been able to do it. I would have been trying to chase that Air Force One look with the tennis shoes tied just right and never getting it quite right. And instead, you dressed the mannequin, and they were actually able to bring in clothing of his to use. So I think that also made it particularly touching for the family, that those were really Billy Ray's jeans hanging on the mannequin, and there's a cast of his jeans there. And I had to figure out how to sag jeans off of a mannequin with no, the mannequins are straight up and down. Real people have behind or hips or something to hold pants up or to help hold pants up. I had to actually pin the pants to the mannequin so that they wouldn't fall down, and they sagged just the right amount, because he wore a little sag in his jeans. But I think that this is one of the few sculptures in the country that portrays a young African American man with his sagging jeans and hoodie. So I'm really proud of it. It was quite an achievement for me, and I'm really hoping that the family continue and the community continues to enjoy it for many, many years. Any online questions or?
I have a question for you.
Yes.
How did you feel the whole time you were creating this the statue connecting to Billy Ray's story, and have you done that in the past as far as having that like emotional connection with things you've done with other pieces?
How did I feel during the process, and how did I connect emotionally to the project? Well, because like I briefly mentioned earlier, I've had some tragic losses in my life, and as a mother who's my son Jamin is now 18, so he doesn't look like the pictures that are in the slideshow anymore. He's a grown man now. I worry about him going out into the world and how safe it will be for him. And so I've placed a lot of my worry into my art, and grief for my foster sons, Tori and Charles Carter, who were murdered in 2008 in Indianapolis, Indiana, days before Obama was elected. And I got word. I was just about to go out and do some door knocking when I got word that they had been murdered. They were no longer still in my home. They were 18 and 19 when they were tragically murdered. So I could identify with that aspect of Shalisa Hayes, Billy Ray's mom's story. And I think that's also one of the reasons why she selected me, because to me it wasn't just a project, it wasn't just a job. It was part of what I feel is a calling. To do memorial work that memorializes so many of our young people of color who are lost. So that's what keeps me pushing on doing my artwork, and not just taking a job in tech that'll pay me really well and the heck with doing art. Because art is hard. Art is the squiggly path of a career, and it's you have to kind of, in many ways, other artists can tell you how they did it or how they achieved something, but your path is going to be different. And for me, when I was going to art school, I never imagined I would be doing memorial sculptures. I don't think I even took a sculpture class when I was in art school. 4 years of art school, never took a sculpture class. Because I didn't think this is what I would be doing. I thought I would be doing design or illustration. And it's really been a turnaround for me that this is where I seem to have found my niche, where I've found meaning, and where I'm excited about the work. I enjoy working with families, even though it presented its own set of challenges. I had many meetings with Shalisa about. She's like, well, shorten his mustache. No, get rid of that mustache. No, raise the eyebrow here. His brow furrowed a little bit more. Add some more definition to the cheeks over here. And it's like, but I appreciated her feedback because I would have hated to have gotten all the way through with this finished sculpture, and then she look at that and say, that's not my son, or that's not my boy. And so we ended up, working really well together, and I was happy that the family and friends was open to work with me as they were. So I saw a hand up over there.
So
Yes.
how did you come to get into bronze work?
Well, so the question is, how do I come to getting to bronze work? So, like I said, this is public art, which is I took the work boot camp with the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture on public art in 2017, and started doing temporary murals and installations then, and it kind of progressed from $5,000 commission for a temporary installation on up to like a $25,000 commission from Sound Transit for a permanent piece, which I'm still working on for Redmond Transit Center. I have to do 5 permanent mural designs that will be translated into mosaic or porcelain enamel for their new Redmond station. So I do the design, and it's handed over to fabricators who will then take it all the way to the finished piece. And bronze is much like that. I think I took one bronze workshop at Art Center years ago just for fun. And when I didn't pick up my bronze sculpture soon enough, they remelted it. And it's like I don't even have any pictures of that. And so I went out for this commission. I said, I have worked in bronze before, but I don't have any pictures to show you. You just have to trust me. And they did, and I found a great foundry to work with me. And they kind of, since they do so much bronze work, Ed, who's the owner of the studio, he is also an artist, but he does a lot of casting for other artists as well. So he's like, okay, you need to do X, Y, and Z. We need this, that, the other. And he was great working with the city because the city of Tacoma had an Office of Arts and Cultural Vitality where Rebecca Silverson was wonderful. She was my project manager, and she was the liaison between myself and Tacoma Metro Parks. That is a big bureaucracy. So I would tell her, it's like, you know what, we need more time on this, or these are the considerations, or now we got to redo structural engineering. Are they going to chip any more money in for that? And so that was nice. And I kind of like the collaborative aspect of public art. I'm one of those artists that if I'm just sitting alone in a studio, sometimes I kind of struggle. It's like, what am I going to paint today? But when I read a commission, or that where a lot of times in public art they've already decided what they want, and it's like I decide whether or not I'm interested in doing that. So when I read this call to arts, I said, yeah, this is something I'd really like to do. They probably won't choose me, but I'm going to take a shot. So I send in my qualifications and my slides in, artist statement and bio, slideshow. Got selected as one of the 3 finalists, went in for an interview, which it is like being on the hot seat. And you answer questions from the panel, and they selected me. And it's like, okay, I'm going to rise to this challenge. And Shalisa told me, one of the reasons why I selected you, first of all, I just live a few blocks away from you, so you can't get away from me. And I know that you care, that this is important to you. It's not just a job online on a spreadsheet for you. This will be something that you'll put your heart and soul into. And she was right. So I gave, 2 years ago, I gave a smaller version of this talk before all of the casting and stuff was done, when it was mostly just me trying to go through budgets and managing where the sculpture was going to go, and delay after delay, and back and forth and up and down. And now it's all finished. So I thought I would come back to ACES this year that we're back in person, or also in hybrid to those people who are watching via Zoom, to come back and give you all an update and say, it's done. So, and then certainly invite everyone down to Tacoma. The new Eastside Community Center just opened up. I think it was 2019 it opened up. And wonderful swimming pool. It's a beacon for the entire community. Young people now have a place to go to enjoy the facilities there. My son works out there every day. He works at the front desk. And he's gotten pretty buff from working out in the gym there. So I was proud and honored to be a part of that. So anyone who would like to come down and see this sculpture, you're more than welcome. Yes?
Do you plan on working in bronze again? Is that an ambition for you to keep this medium going?
Yes, I'd like to work in bronze again. And I've also worked in cut metal as well. So I've done a couple of commissions, one for a building that's being built in the ID, International District, Uncle Bob's Place. I did a design for some of the railing, for patio railing. Myself and several other artists were selected to do that, and so I've done that cut metal piece, and I also did a piece for the Spokane libraries that I think that is sitting in their storage right now in Spokane. It's all finished. They just have to decide when to install it. Because a hiccup came up where some of the bases were poured over a property line between the Spokane libraries and the Spokane parks, and they had to work out between them exactly what they were going to do about it. If they were going to dig up one of the bases and move it, or if they were just going to have a handshake and agree that it's okay for one of the bases to be just over the property line. And so that was another example of a delay that if you're a public artist, that's outside of your control. Would have been nice if somebody had told me before the basis report where the property line was. I saw a field of dug up construction area. I was like, I can go back to the construction fence, but no. So that was interesting, and having art delivery folks come and pick up my piece and drive it across Snoqualmie Pass in the middle of winter. So they could go into a garage and wait for Spokane libraries to decide when they wanted to install it. So that was an interesting challenge in and of itself, deciding on paint colors and stuff, yes. But I would be more than open to doing another bronze piece. I think my future projects right now that are upcoming are mostly murals, like I mentioned, Redmond Commission, and also for Africatown, I think it's at 23rd and Union. They have a new building that they're building there, and I'm going to be doing a mural for them. So it's been an interesting journey, and I really enjoy what I'm doing. And I also teach for Arts Corps, because I believe it's your responsibility when you learn something, each one teach one. So. Any more questions? Yep. All right. Thank you very much for having me back, ACES.
Thank you.